Hey there, everybody. What is up? Jim Cyril and Tanya Klein here from Coverage Inc., the leader in screenplay analysis, development, and editing services since 2002. Good evening, Tanya. How are you today?
Good evening. Good. How about yourself?
Hey, so you notice I've moved Arnold over to
Yes,
the
I
right
can see your Arnold.
and or on my left. I don't know, depending on the way the screen's going to look. And you've got Buffy
And
on
I've
your
got
left. Now,
Buffy. So who's gonna win?
would that be the death match of the century or what? I would pay good
Buffy
money.
versus the Terminator.
I would pay good money to see
Okay,
that.
anybody good with AI, feel free to, show us what that would look like.
Oh my God, there's so many of these AI matchups. Are you seeing
Yeah.
these on
Yeah, yeah,
YouTube
yeah.
now?
Yeah.
It's it's crazy. Anyway, I smell something cooking on the grill. Smells like steaks.
Ha ha
What are
ha.
we talking
Yes.
about today, Tanya?
We're gonna talk about steaks, but not the ones on the grill.
Ah,
We are going to talk about stakes in a screenplay because what we see very often is a lack thereof. And as in, well, if the protagonist achieves their goal, that's great. If the protagonist doesn't achieve their goal, that's okay too. So you don't want that. You want actual stakes. And now a lot of people will say, but I don't get it. I mean, not, the whole world cannot face destruction in every movie
no.
or every TV show. That is true. And that is not what we're talking about here. We
No.
are talking about stakes for the protagonist. And sometimes, yes, those stakes are the protagonist's life, and literally, and sometimes figuratively,
Yeah.
as in, if I don't succeed at this competition, if I don't get the girl, if I don't succeed at my new job, then I will die. Not literally, but figuratively.
Yeah. Hello, cat.
I know. I mean, she tends to steal the scene, doesn't she?
Okay, so look, yeah, I think first let's get out that we do see, a lot of scripts that come into Coverage Inc. that this is a problem, right? Where, the stakes just aren't high enough. And, we have had people who have said to us like, well, I mean, this isn't like, this person can't like this isn't about like saving the world or solving a murder. This is like, a little, a personal thing or something like that. Look, there's all different kinds of stakes as long as it's crucial to the protagonist. There's like emotional stakes. There's like intellectual stakes. It's just whatever it is. If you're talking a feature film, the stakes have to be high, and what that means is they have to be high for the protagonist. Personal stakes for the protagonist. The price of failure must be dire. Like if they fail at whatever it is that they're, attempting to do that is so crucial to them, well, if they're able to just like fail and go, oh, well, I guess I'll just go back to my life and everything will continue, that's not good enough stakes. We're not going to be engaged in that story if that person can just, have a nice soft landing and go back to, well, life's boring and it's not all that engaging, but there's got to be or else.
Exactly. And that is how you keep the audience involved. If the protagonist, again, can go back to his life, then why should we care? Why should we watch or why should we read the script? And the other thing that we absolutely need to mention is, apart from overall stakes, we need to have stakes in every single scene. And that does not mean that, every scene is a confrontation between the protagonist and the antagonist.
Right.
No. But it means something very important has to be at stake in this scene. And it might just be, hey, if it's, a first date, oh my God, this is the person I really want to impress because I really, really like this person. So I really want to impress this person. Okay, important stakes for the protagonist.
Yeah, and also specific objectives for each scene, right? Because that goes to stakes, and so resolving these objectives, setting them up and knocking them down, is crucially important to keep the viewer engaged and to keep raising the stakes. These objectives keep things urgent. They keep things compelling. And also defeat in achieving those objectives can also raise the stakes because now the protagonist has to redouble their effort or zig when they want it to zag. All of that is good, but having clear objectives throughout, like, okay, your macro objective is your protagonist wants to achieve this, or else something very bad is going to happen. But along the way, there may be steps that need to be achieved. And each one of those has stakes attached to it.
Exactly. And coming back to failures, yes, your protagonist absolutely should fail a lot. I mean, as they say, put your protagonist up on the tree and then, keep throwing rocks at them and keep throwing rocks at them. And again, this comes to stakes. Your protagonist wants something that's very, 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 very important to them. But whatever they try, they don't succeed. And then it does something to them emotionally, making it, more difficult for them to succeed, getting them to try harder, getting them to find ways to overcome the obstacles. So, yes, throw those rocks at your protagonist.
Well, yeah, that's a great point. And this is something that we've seen a lot of in recent movies where, the protagonist is just naturally great at everything. And the only problem is that people don't recognize that this person's awesomeness, right? And so from get-go, like they never have to train, they never have to work hard, they never have to fail. And, like, just imagine if Luke Skywalker just like, was everything was handed to him in Empire Strikes Back, and he didn't have to go to Dagobah and learn from Yoda and fail before he could succeed. That's part of the hero's journey. But so many movies these days are just like, no, we don't need any of that. It's called the Mary Sue complex, where like a character is they're just perfect. It's just everyone around them who doesn't understand them. Like,
Yeah,
yeah, no.
everybody has all of the skills that they need. Everybody, there's this. Since you mentioned, since you mentioned Star Wars, the Daisy Ridley character. Oh, I can fly this
Oh,
ship that I've never seen before, and I mean, we
oh my
don't.
God, yeah.
I mean, my
That's
goodness.
like the ultimate Mary Sue. She was good at everything. She was better than Han Solo at flying the Millennium Falcon, even though she'd never flown this ship before.
Or
And even,
exactly.
oh, oh my
Yeah,
God, just
but
terrible,
so
terrible.
basically,
But
yes.
but back
So
to stakes.
make it difficult for your character. That's why, for example, your antagonist needs to be stronger than your protagonist. Why?
Yeah.
Because then your protagonist has to work a lot harder, and achieving this all important goal is going to be so much more difficult for them.
Let's also talk a little bit about the ticking clock factor and just a time limit or a deadline in general, right? So oftentimes, a movie at the inciting incident, you'll know what the mission is. The protagonist will know what the mission is, and they will have an idea of how much time they have to accomplish this. Not always, but sometimes there could be a certain urgency attached, like you need to get here within 5 days, right? So that's a deadline. It's a ticking clock. But so that automatically imbues the screenplay, the journey, with more of a sense of urgency because we, the audience, know, the undercurrent of every scene, the subtext of every scene is there is no time to lose. That increases the urgency. But what many screenplays do is in Act Three, in particular, the ticking clock kicks in, where the time frame we thought we had 2 weeks. No, you actually have 2 hours. Or, somebody gets kidnapped and now the stakes are dialed up to 11 because in addition to solving the problem, we've got to deal with, rescuing the cohort or whatever it is. And so it's an old movie trope, but it still works great. And you still see movies to this day that, here comes Act Three, here's the ticking clock, boom, kicks in. Like, nope, you don't have the 2 days you thought you had. And it's
Yeah,
a wonderful technique to use.
exactly. And to clarify, this doesn't just work for, let's say, action movies, since you mentioned kidnapping somebody. It works for everything, and it also works for like comedies, for dramas,
Yeah.
for any instance where the stakes might not be literal life and death, but the
Yeah.
stakes are emotional. In other words, our
Yeah.
protagonist has to dot dot dot, get this, get the girl, get the job, finish whatever.
Yeah.
It works.
It's easy to just sort of look at this always in the context of, the action movie or something like that, because that's where these things tend to be the most demonstrable. But even, stakes can be spiritual. They can it can be a small personal story, but still has enormous, enormous stakes to the protagonist. And therefore, if it's, personal to the protagonist and we care about the protagonist, it will be it will be engaging to the audience as well.
Exactly. So one way to look at it, we're assuming you know what your macro quest is, what the end goal for the protagonist is. So make sure this end goal is very personal and very important to the protagonist. But then what also works is to go actually scene by scene and ask yourself, okay, what is my character trying to accomplish in this scene? Why is this scene included in this screenplay?
Yeah.
What makes this scene important to the character, to the protagonist's development, or to the story development?
Right.
What is
It's got to
going
be
on and what is
essential.
in the way?
Yeah, it's got to be essential, because if it isn't essential,
Yeah,
then it should get cut. Just because it's a good scene or has, good interplay or good dialogue, if it doesn't move the story forward, doesn't, you know, bring your character either closer to his or her goal, or, sets the character back from achieving that goal, then that scene may have to be removed. But there's one other point regarding stakes, Tanya, that I wanted to bring up. And oftentimes, we'll get in a script that, that should be something else. I think we've talked about this in another video, but let's say pilots versus features and how that relates to stakes, right? So as we've just spent this whole video talking about, you always need personal stakes, strong personal stakes. Even in an ensemble, there should be one character who stands out, and that person should carry the personal stakes. The cost of failure should be dire. That's one key feature of a movie idea, right? Versus TV. Now, TV can have stakes that are that high, a TV pilot, sure. But oftentimes in TV, we'll wind up with episode by episode stakes where it's not necessarily personal to the protagonist. They may, the lawyer may win the case, right? But if the lawyer loses the case, it's not necessarily going to affect that person's life, except maybe in the Lincoln Lawyer, where they do a very good job of making the stakes personal. The stuff always seems to intrude onto poor Mickey's personal life, and of course that's a little bit of fiction that keeps things more engaging.
well, but bottom line is often what we have in TV are procedurals. The cops solve the case. The
Yeah.
doctors figure out what the disease is.
But basically, if the stakes are not that high, but it's still an interesting or engaging story, maybe it's not a movie story. Maybe it's a TV story.
Yeah.
Just give some thought to that. Anything else we want to cover on this topic?
I think that's it. And if you guys have any questions, you know how to reach us.
How do they reach us, Tanya?
They reach us via email info@coverageinc.com.
Thanks for watching, everybody. Leave a comment if you have any questions, or email us like Tanya said, and please like and subscribe. We appreciate you, and we'll see you in the next video.